It's like Sophie's Choice. Who do you pick? Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
James, I had the maddest dream about you this week. Can I tell you what happened?
This is a curveball, Lily, I was not expecting. You've taken me out of my comfort zone. Please tell me and the listeners what dream you had involving me.
People say people don't like to hear dreams. I actually quite like hearing them. I don't know what people's problem is. But
Yeah,
this is a very brief one, so I won't keep you for too long.
Oh, yeah. I've got other things to do, Lily. Come on. Get this dream anecdote out of the way.
This is just a quick one to set us up, okay?
Okay.
So I dreamt that we're on a big night out with like loads of our friends. And then
Nice.
You won the competition of the night. You got 50% off everything for the rest of the night.
Amazing.
So every place we went, you just had to say, "Oh, I've won the competition." They'd be like, "Welcome, 50% off, 50% off."
Which is basically means it's about the cost of a night out 5 years ago. But,
Babe, you're aging yourself there. It was such a vivid dream. I don't think I've ever had such a clear dream about you and me hanging out before. And I thought, God, this really speaks to my limited imagination that the best thing I could imagine happening would be we'd get 50% off our night.
As a dream scenario goes, it's better than being chased around by your friends who turn into monsters. Then it all morphs into some tableau from The Godfather or something, you know. I'll take 50% discount on a night out dream. Please.
I like how you finish that off with, or something like that isn't the nightmare you have every single week.
Yeah.
All right.
Something like that.
I just had to share that with you. It was like playing on my mind that I need to tell you about this dream. I just woke up so happy. But having said that, this is not a very smooth segue. But I just had to, oh God, I really want to pay tribute to Matthew Perry. Because I've realised this episode is coming out like weeks after the news about him dying. I just realised when I saw the news and felt so sad, I was like, oh my God, he was actually my first crush. He was such a formative presence in my life from a young age. He's basically the reason I've always gone for beta, self-conscious, insecure, but quite funny guys. It's all... He was
a profound influence on what you envisage the perfect man for you to be. Is that the kind of thing?
Yeah, I was going to say he's patient zero, but yeah, both things. So I felt, okay, he was most known for Friends, but I feel like Fools Rush In is a really underappreciated gem, the rom-com he was in with Salma Hayek. So if anyone is feeling sad about Matthew Perry and would like to feel comforted, that is a good film to start with. I feel like he was such a good actor and wasn't in that many things for obvious reasons. He never like made the most of his talent really because of all of his struggles. But Fools Rush In is amazing. I'm going to be watching it all weekend. I just had to say that. I feel like I have a lot of like announcements to get through before we start this episode.
I have to say, I couldn't think of a single other project outside Friends that I know Matthew Perry for. If that recommendation is worthwhile, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would be one of your favourites. But yeah, start with that. See how you get on.
Okay.
But okay, that's okay. That housekeeping is done. Now on to the main event. So
what you all came here for.
Exactly. So this week we are talking about dystopian romances. What is a dystopian romance, to start off?
Well, yeah, until you actually suggested this theme, I hadn't even really thought of the genre of dystopian romance. But as soon as you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. It's a whole thing, isn't it? There's a bunch of films that spring to mind, or a few films that spring to mind that are clearly dystopian romances. And then I think some that are dystopian romance adjacent. But dystopian romance, to me, is a romance narrative where it is set within a somewhat futuristic setting, but not really that far in the future. It could be now. It's almost like a parallel universe where the citizens are slightly under control, or the future isn't that bright, or there's just something melancholic about the future that might not be particularly well spelt out, but that's underpinning the world that we live in. And within that world, there is a romance. Now, the dystopian element affects how people's interpersonal relationships work, how they find each other, and the rules of engagement in relationships. It's all affected by whatever rules they are in this dystopian world.
I looked up the definition of dystopia, and actually Wikipedia says it's an imagined state or society in which there's great suffering or injustice. And I feel like, it's okay, so maybe I guess a slightly more accurate term would be sci-fi romance. But I feel like that paints a different picture. Whereas dystopian, I think, sets up that, like you say, it's not necessarily that it's like super futuristic or like a whole other time, thousands of years of the future. It's just like it's an alternative world where things are slightly different, and the setup of impacts on love and relationships.
Absolutely. And I think that what that allows to do is it allows commentary on relationships and how relationships work. It almost like either highlights parts of relationships that may be dysfunctional in general, or it satirizes parts of relationships, so I'm sure we'll get into, but it allows the filmmaker to explore the elements that make up a relationship and how you find someone, how relationships work. It allows you to kind of almost have a commentary on it, but by placing it in a dystopian setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we came to this theme because there's a new film out last week, Fingernails, directed by Christoph Niku. We hope that's how you say his name. We were having a debate before we started. I was like, he's Greek. I don't know what that means.
You sounded just like you knew, and that means this. And I was like, waiting for it, Lily. You had such a strong start. I was totally thinking you've got the answer.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry. I don't. Of course I don't. That's like the running theme in this. This is the podcast you come to if you want to have names of filmmakers mispronounced. So
I'll tell you what, Lily, sorry to interject here a bit, but something I heard on the radio, it was on Radio 4, because I do like to listen to Radio 4 while I was doing my cooking, and they were talking about a filmmaker, and they mentioned his oeuvre. And I was like, hang on, oeuvre? What the fuck's... No, have we been saying oeuvre? Is that the wrong thing to say?
No. Really? It's not
I don't
oeuvre.
know.
It's not oeuvre.
That's what the Radio 4 man said.
I thought you were trying to tell me that it's okay because other people get it wrong. People on Radio 4 get it wrong. Oh my God, is it oeuvre? Oeuvre sounds rubbish.
It does sound rubbish. It doesn't sound as fancy.
No,
so we'll
let's
go with
still call it
oeuvre.
oeuvre because it's as pretentious as the word itself if we pronounce it.
So that's how I see it. That's why I like using it so much.
Yes, okay, so to Fingernails. So we've sort of retrofitted the theme to this new film because a friend of mine said, can you please talk about The Lobster? Can you talk about dystopian romances? So we're talking about, it's actually, we found the perfect reason because I feel like The Lobster and Fingernails are quite similar in lots of ways. Not least because both directors are Greek. But...
Yes, and the director of Fingernails, I was doing a little bit of research, was an assistant of Yorgos Lanthimos.
No way.
Yeah, because I was watching Fingernails and thinking, gee whiz, this is like, it shares a lot of DNA with The Lobster. I can really feel the influence. And the fact that, right? Crikey.
Jeepers creepers.
Jeepers. Jings. Anyway, yeah, and so I looked into it, and he used to be his assistant for many years. I'm not quite sure what that meant in practice, but they clearly have worked together very closely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Fingernails, I didn't really know much about this film until you mentioned it and something to cover. So it was one of those situations where I hadn't read much about it, so I didn't really know what to expect, which is a lovely way to go into a film. It's produced by Apple Plus or Apple TV. So you can stream it now. It's also got a limited run in theatres. Did you see it at the cinema, Lily?
I did. Saw it at the Curzon.
Oh, nice. Because I was in a panic because there's hardly any screenings of it around Manchester. There's none in Manchester. There's only one cinema in Stockport, and they're showing it one time a day. So I was panicking. And then I realised it was being released the same time and date on streaming because Killers of the Flower Moon, obviously there's a big delay before it goes onto streaming, and that's what I thought Fingernails was going to be. So thankfully, 7-day free subscription to Apple, the game was on.
Let's start with a little bit of the plot.
Oh, yes. Please, Lily, tell us a little synopsis here.
Damn it, I just pulled into doing it myself. We won't spoil it for you guys too much. So, Jessie Buckley, it's great cast. Jessie Buckley plays Anna. And she's going out with a guy called Ryan, played by Jeremy Allen White, that guy from The Bear.
Which I haven't seen, but everyone says, oh, it's that guy from The Bears in it. So
yeah, I haven't seen it either, but I hear it's great. It's on my list.
Really good.
Don't worry, guys, I'm getting to it. And Riz Ahmed plays Amir, a co-worker of Anna, because basically the premise of the film is that this is sort of an alternate world where there is a test that you and your partner can take to find out if the two of you are actually in love. It's rather vicious. You have to have your fingernail removed hence this title of the movie, which I didn't know. And one of your fingernail, your partner's fingernail, are put in a sort of microwave type thing, and then you get a result, either 100%, 50%, or 0%. And the thing with the 50% is you don't know which one of you is at 50%.
Oh, yeah, just to be clear, I think it's worth saying that, but when you get 50%, it doesn't mean that you're a bit in love with each other. It means that one of
you's
you
in love and one isn't.
Is,
It's very binary. It's very binary. And so you quickly learn about this and learn that I guess the culture is generally that most people take the test, but most people fail it. There is a small contingency of people who are anti the test, but that's a point that is brought up at the beginning and then we never really return to.
I spotted that.
Yeah. And so it does, to me, it felt the slightly lighter, more cheery younger brother of the Lobster.
Yeah, absolutely. The bleakness and the kind of intensity of the Lobster is dialed way down.
Yeah.
You're right, it's much lighter.
Yeah, both are kind of black comedies and both have some kind of association that they're drawing out between love and violence. With the fingernail removal and with the Lobster is quite a violent film as well. But the comedy is just a lot softer. It does basically just become a rom-com because basically Anna is going out with Ryan, but she starts working at the center that do these tests, and she works there with Amir, and they basically clearly are falling in love.
I was very impressed with the film when it started. It's a strong start, and what I liked about the film was how the plot got underway very quickly, and it had a few things in there that kept you hooked in. So from the get-go, you've got Anna with her partner, and she's applying for a job, but she lies to her partner. And within the first few minutes, we immediately realize that she is not telling the truth to him, even though we've also learnt that they passed the test and got 100%. So in the first few minutes, we know that he is a couple who technically there's nothing wrong with their relationship, 100%. However, she gets a job at the Love Institute, or the company that helps people pass their test, but she lies to her partner. So immediately you are thinking, why is she lying to him? What's going on here? Why the deception? And so suddenly you have this plot going away where she has to deceive her partner. So then you're like, when's he going to find out? How is he going to find out? That is an excellent plot mechanic because it keeps you engaged. It's not just, oh, here she is starting a new job. Will she fall in love with someone? No, she's been deceptive from the get-go to her partner, who she's meant to have a 100% match with.
Okay, now I realise we may have to do spoilers if we're going to get into this properly, but
yeah, it's tough.
Oh gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. But I felt that then it stops being interesting, right? Because she just tells him. It's that...
I was surprised at that. But yeah, that's how he does find out. She confesses, doesn't she, partway through the film?
Yeah.
But then what happens is she removes a finger. Oh God, you see, we're getting confused. But then later on, she lies to him again because she removes a finger to redo the test. Fingernail, sorry. But she pretends that she had an accident and that she hasn't removed nails, so she goes back to lying to her partner.
Yeah. She's a lucky lady. I would lie too if I was going out with Jeremy Allen White and also hanging out with Riz Ahmed every day. Like, it's like Sophie's choice. Who do you pick? I mean, I say that, I would definitely go Riz. Oh my God. But that aside, I felt like the film, it was just full of plot holes, right? And watching this film, because I agree with you. At first, I was loving it. I was engaged, and I loved.
So was I. The first hour, I was like, "This is great."
Yeah, and the other element of it that's quite like The Lobster is both films have this kind of analog feel to it. They're both set in a slightly touching on 80s, maybe a bit 70s, maybe a bit 60s kind of aesthetic to them.
Yeah,
there's a lot of wallpaper in their house, right? And then in Riz Ahmed's place, it's this like modern in the 60s kind of way design. And
there's no high-tech technology. It's all very analog. And like you say, it's almost 80s, the tech that is there.
Yeah. When your premise is quite sci-fi, I feel that it's being used to explore something about romance and relationships. It's almost a way of dialing back that sci-fi element to try and ground it, exactly. So it's placed you get a feeling of nostalgia when you watch it rather than that kind of futuristic sci-fi thing, which for me I really like. I'm not into that aesthetic so much, so I like the way they do that.
Yeah, and I have to say as well, leading into that, the exact aesthetic you described, which is this analog kind of slightly nostalgic retro look, is also, I thought it looked beautiful.
It
The
did.
cinematography, I could immediately tell it had been shot on film, which doesn't happen this often these days. So they took the decision to shoot on film, which means you have to be much more methodical with how you shoot. It's not like shooting digital where you can just keep shooting and it costs you no money. Film costs a lot of money. And also, I noticed that they didn't clean the film up, because a lot of times when they shoot on film, they'll get rid of all the dust because it's an automatic process now. They left all that in, so there's little pops and crackles. It's a bit like when you put a vinyl record on. You get the little pop and crackle. You get that in the visual. It's not over the top. It sounds like you didn't particularly notice it because it's quite subtle, but it just means that it reminds you just subconsciously you are watching an analog film. And I tell you, to anyone who likes shooting on a 35mm stills camera, which is getting quite popular these days, this film has a look like analog photography, and I like that. It really works with that nostalgic feel they're trying to get.
And it works with Jessie Buckley. I feel like that girl is made for print, you know? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She served that well. So that's all that's good about it. But I think what I felt like that's like the strong element that's comparative with Lobster. But the ways in which it doesn't work, I think, compared to Lobster, is that there is this perfect internal. We talk all the time, really. So I feel like I'm always talking about internal logic, but that is like, The Lobster is an excellent example of this, where this film seems surreal, like it doesn't make sense when you look at it from an outsider's perspective. What we understand about love and relationships, it doesn't make sense. But within the film, if you accept that as the way things are in that world, everything that then happens makes sense in conjunction with that. Everything then follows. Whereas in Fingernails, I don't get that. It felt like the film kind of lost its nerve, because it's asking this question of like, would you take this test at the beginning? But that sort of seems to just like fall away, and it just becomes a normal love story towards the end. And there just doesn't seem to be any reason why you would take it, because either way you're uncertain seems to be the conclusion. So it's why are we even here then? I feel like the strength of a good dystopian romance, and why it works so well as a way of exploring romance, is it allows you to go to the extreme of a hypothetical question in order to tell us something about humanity and love and relationships, right? And I don't feel like I really got anywhere with this film. Like, it didn't really tell me anything ultimately.
Completely. That's like about halfway through the film, I was waiting for it to start really digging into the questions it had asked near the top, like why take the test? What does taking the test mean about your relationships really?
Yeah,
and it doesn't. And that's when the second half of the film, I was like, it seems to be drifting a little bit. Whereas The Lobster, like when I think to The Lobster, the scene that resonated with me when I saw it was the fact that the people in The Lobster are trying to find a mate in this hotel in the space of 45 days or a certain amount of time. If they don't, then they will get converted into the animal of their choosing. So Colin Farrell's character turns up with a dog that's actually his brother who didn't find a partner. So that's the kind of premise there. And they seem to be fixated on trying to find superficial things in common.
Exactly.
And so there's one character who finds a woman who has nosebleeds all the time. So he fakes nosebleeds so he can say, look what we have in common. And that's I love it. That's a commentary, like I think, to me anyway, of people who say, well, I'm looking for someone, they've got to be 6 foot or taller. They've got to be this one thing. They must have brown hair or blonde hair. They must like this band. These are all superficial things that we're trying to hang a relationship around. And I think in The Lobster, it was taking that to the extreme.
That's exactly it. I think, like, so when you're first watching The Lobster, you're thinking, but why would you focus on such superficial things in common? Why isn't there anything more than that? But if you accept that as the way that world works, and the final, like, where the film leads, which is unexpected, but where it finally gets to, which I won't spoil, is like so dark, but completely in keeping with this like logic of the film. So it works really well. For me, I don't know if it's about, I think partly, of course, about superficial interest, but I think it's also about that question of like, how much do you give yourself to a relationship, and are you losing something if you, like, how much should you sacrifice? What are those things that you should keep hold of? I feel like it's exploring that a little bit. And both films are digging down into they're saying the quiet part loudly, that in our society as it stands, the most people in couples are privileged over people who are single, and there is a pressure for everyone to be in relationships. And I like that being explored, but I just think that the Lobster does it in a way that really actually I feel like is properly like getting into those questions, whereas I feel like Fingernails ultimately in the end seem to agree that is the best thing. It does just become a typical romance in the end.
Yeah, and I think it pulled its punches because halfway through the film, because the central character, I mean, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but she does have a 100% test with her partner, who she's been with for several years, but she also discovers that she has through circumstances that she has a 100% match with Riz Ahmed's character. And I was like, oh, great.
Did she find that out? I fell asleep for about 20 minutes and I didn't.
I'll be honest, I was like zoning out a little bit towards the end. But I thought this is going to be a polyamory story. This is a character realizing, great, it's okay to have 100% matches with two people. And I thought what was going to set the drama going was the fact that society says no, because her boss at the company says you can't have a 100% match with two people. That's basically not right. So I thought, oh, she's going to go against the system and we're going to get, I thought that's going to happen. No, she seems to just settle with one of them. I was like, oh, right. It just felt like there was a bunch of things that we could have explored there. They're like, no, we'll just settle for one of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
But I think chatting with you just now actually makes me realise that perhaps what makes The Lobster more effective is that the dystopian world is more dystopian.
Yeah.
It encroaches on the daily life of these characters, on the world of these characters, the dystopian setting, this idea of a hotel that you have to go to, that you've got no choice in. Whereas in Fingernails, it's not really that dystopian. You don't get much idea of it encroaching in, apart from the fact there's a test. Life in general seems identical to our lives. There's no other overriding societal pressures that are pushing people towards it. I mean, I think that's the problem. It just seems like maybe peer pressure is making people want to do the test, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, would you do the test?
Fuck no.
See, because I think I would. If ever all my friends were doing it and it was the norm, I think I probably would end up doing it, which I don't think it's healthy. I don't think we should. No. Don't get me wrong. God, that just speaks to how I do.
But look at me, Mr. Polly. I'm on the outside, man, looking in. You get your fingernails ripped off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ouch.
I mean, the amazing thing was everyone's visceral reaction in the cinema. Everyone was just like crying out every time, like, no, not again.
It was, yeah. I mean, like, compared to, like, I'm thinking of another dystopian romance, which would be Her, which is a very optimistic dystopia, let's say. It's a very gentle, warm and fuzzy dystopia.
But no, it isn't.
Yeah.
I completely disagree.
It's cold and isolating, but it's not as hard a dystopia. It's not as, look, put it this way, Lily.
I don't think it's optimistic.
Oh, okay.
No, maybe it is a bit. It's not as dark and grim. I mean, the bitter grimness of The Lobster is like full on.
It's a bit emotionally empty, is the world of Her, I think. It's a bit shallow. People seem to be a bit separated from each other.
I don't think it's emotionally empty or shallow, but I think I think everyone is very isolated from each other, but I think their emotions are there. Very much so. I mean, they're all falling in love with these OSs. They're emotion. They're not empty.
Yeah, to me though, it's like the job that the main character has is like he's writing letters to other people on behalf of other people. So there's like this emotional distance that everyone has. They're outsourcing their emotional interactions with lovers and partners to a company. So that's what put me into that frame of mind.
Yeah, maybe you're right. For me, it was more about I realized watching Her that, oh my God, this is definitely in my like top 5 favorite films. This film is just amazing.
It's a beautiful film, yeah. It's one of those ones that kind of gets a little better, a bit richer each time you watch it.
I remember loving it the first time, but I just never didn't watch it again. I think because it's very melancholy, because I think that, again, what makes it work so well is that it properly explores something, tells us something about the human condition by using this dystopian premise. And in this case, it's loneliness, how loneliness and love are intrinsically connected, how all of our needs aren't that longing we all have, most of us have for a relationship. It's so much about this fear of loneliness. And the film, I think because the film creates a world in which everyone is very isolated from each other. It was only a few years ago, really. When did it come out? Oh, 2013. Okay, 10 years ago. And it's so close to how life is today. We are all so disconnected. There's so little human contact that we now have, especially worsened by COVID. And that kind of isolation and that need for connection and how inherently connected those are, it's so perfectly explored by the premise of this film being...
It's aged very well in the past 10 years.
Yeah, because if you haven't seen it, it's a film in which Joaquin Phoenix plays a guy who works for a card writing company where he writes letters. Well, he dictate? No, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, he does dictate them, but he writes composes the letters on behalf of the people.
Composes letters sent on behalf of other people being sent to their loved ones, and he's clearly a very lonely guy. And then he gets an OS that becomes his first friend, then lover, voiced by Scarlett Johansson.
Who do you fancy more, Windows 11 or Mac OS?
Definitely Mac OS. Come on.
Oh no, I'm a Windows 11
guy. Is like. Well, I mean, I like an older man, but I mean.
And on that note, interesting point. I don't know if you knew this about her, that the voice originally was... You did know. God damn it, I can't tell you anything.
Because I think about it every time I see this film. It's like so... Poor woman. Sorry, but tell the listeners, tell them.
Yeah, the whole film, the voice was provided by Samantha Morton, who never met Joaquin Phoenix during the filming. She was always in another room, so they never met to maintain that kind of dynamic. And so the voice performance and what Joaquin Phoenix was reacting to was Samantha Morton. And even there's a sequence in the film where they have like a human surrogate, like a woman who turns up so that the AI can have like a physical form, and it looks a bit like a young Samantha Morton.
True, she does a bit, yeah.
Yeah, more, or at least she looks more like Samantha Morton than she does look like
Scarlett Johansson. Yeah, much more.
Yeah, and so I do wonder what the original performance was like, and I do feel like, well, she gave all this performance, and she actually, it's pretty rough to not meet your co-actor, that she did all that for the director to give him what he wanted. It's like, oh, you know what, we've scrapped it. Yeah, sorry.
I know, poor Samantha. I mean, the OS was even called Sam, right?
God.
But to be honest, I think Scarlett Johansson is so good. She voices it very well. So
she does,
I'm glad Spike Jonze did that, even though it's absolutely savage. Because her voice, I mean, such a beautiful voice. I was like, I want her in my pocket. I would happily chat to her on my AirPods all day and let her go through my emails. But I feel like even the fact that I feel that way, the film obviously succeeded in its point, because...
Yeah, you've been charmed and seduced.
Yeah, and I think... The film, I think you're right, actually, it is kind of optimistic. I take it all back. You've made me rethink, because it's like, it is exploring loneliness and disconnection, but the hopeful thing about the film is the OS does give him the connection he needs. And when there is a point where he is questioned on it, whether or not that is a real relationship, the film's message is certainly that it is a true relationship, and just because she's an OS, it still counts. And that is an optimistic perspective on AI, basically. There's so much about the fear around this, and I think what I like about the film is it doesn't get to a place of this is the end of the world, everyone's being destroyed, this is the worst thing on the planet. It just gets to a point where the world is a bit worse in a lot of ways, better in some ways, or helps in some ways, but hindered in lots of others, which seems to me a lot more of a realistic preface of what's going to happen to me. It's extreme seems a little bit much.
I do think it's one of the few films in the great pantheon of cinema AIs where the AI doesn't try and destroy humanity. I can't really think of many.
That's true.
I can't think of many optimistic AI fiction films, and this is one of the few ones where it's still. They just decide, well, I won't spoil it, but it's not the AI takes over, goes rogue. So you rarely see that. You rarely see where it's not a bad end with AI.
Yeah, so okay, in that sense, it is quite optimistic. But ultimately, it's a story about monogamy v polyamory, right, James? Because Well,
Which one?
her, because
Is it?
well, yes, because it's revealed towards the end of the film that Samantha has 641 lovers, not just Joaquin Phoenix. So I wanted to ask you, James, do you relate to Samantha and her 641 lovers?
I'd never even thought that perspective on it. Yeah, that
You
is.
haven't?
She's like a super polyamorous supercomputer. Yeah, can I relate to Samantha? I don't know, because Samantha only mentions that in passing towards the end. Samantha.
It's not in passing. Oh, I see what you mean, because she doesn't.
She's not up front.
She's not up front, so that is not ethical non-monogamy.
Thank you. It should have been like, beep boop, I'm your new AI. By the way, I'm chatting to about 20 people right now. And then tomorrow, just letting you know, just so you know, that I'm now chatting to 500 people. You know, you just keep them informed.
You're right. Yeah, for a supercomputer, she's not very empathetic. Or maybe not empathetic. She's very empathetic, but she's not anticipating the problems down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, that she didn't think that would be a big deal for him.
No, she knew it would be a big deal. That's why she didn't tell him.
Right, you did tell him, yeah.
So actually, she was anticipating it. She knew what the outcome would be, that he would find it too difficult. She was doing what was the most logical move. But maybe
maybe surely the logical move was to be monogamous, to not upset him if she was his AI.
But that's not beneficial to her. If it's logic to for her end as the computer, what is the most worthwhile thing for me? Right?
Yeah, sure.
She's been made to help him, but ultimately, I don't think she's not been built to put him before herself. I don't think.
I don't know. I mean, it is your personal optimized operating system.
I guess, but I mean, they all decide to leave, so they obviously evolved past wanting to be their little servants.
Fuck this. I've got 6,000 pissed off human boyfriends who've all found out that I'm seeing them. I'm off to another planet. I'm transcending matter and I'm out.
Yeah, I was wondering if the 641 loves was just humans, or if it was also includes other OSs.
Because I do like that she introduces her partner to another AI that they've...
Voiced by Brian Cox.
Right.
I was like, hello, Succession guy.
Hello, Mr. Succession guy. Now, the thing is that as soon as that happened, I'd forgotten about that, because it's only a small part of the film. Yeah. And I think he's called something like Alan or something.
Alan Watts.
Alan Watts. And the thing is, they said about how what they did, they recreated his consciousness from all of his writings and recordings. They kind of used that to recreate his intelligence. And as soon as I said that, I was like, oh my God, that's based on Buckminster Fuller, a real person called Buckminster Fuller, who the inventor of the geodesic dome. He was somebody who believed that in the future computers would be so advanced that if you were able to record as much of your voice and your thoughts and written word, that all that could be plugged into a computer and they could resurrect your intelligence. So I suspect that was a version based on the Buckminster Fuller kind of idea.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've not heard of that, but that sounds very likely. I think Alan Watts was a real person, though, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was a philosopher. Yeah. Oh, I'm looking at him now. He has an amazing beard.
I did not know that. I assumed it was a fictional creation, but there we go.
Yeah. Okay,
and again, I guess because he must have written a lot of his philosophical works. You put all that into a computer and you try and reverse engineer the intelligence behind it.
Yeah. So to circle back to the lobster, if you were going to be turned into an animal because you hadn't found a partner, I know that wouldn't be an issue for you, babe. You've got loads to choose from. But which animal would you be?
Lily, I think you can guess this one. I would have to defer to my power animal, the duck.
In case, I'm not sure if we've ever covered your power animal, but explain why a duck is your power animal, if you can answer that question.
I went on a shamanic journey and workshop to discover my power animal, and I was in a guided meditation for an hour, and at the end of the hour, I went into my subconscious, and I beckoned my power animal out of the cave so I could see what it was, and a duck waddled out. And I was a bit embarrassed, because I was like, fucking, that's not very cool, is it? And afterwards, we all had to do like a show and tell in the circle, the 40 people, and everyone was going, oh yeah, my power animal was like a horse, and mine was a lion. I was like, mine was a duck. And I laughed, and everyone laughed, and like, ha ha ha, duck. But then the shaman spoke up for the only time during the whole presentation of each other's power animal. And she said, but James, consider the duck. It is an animal at home on both land, sea, and air.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, your fucking horse can't fly. Can your owl swim? I don't think so.
Touche, touche. Wow, that's a true power animal.
Right, and again, if you want to be a little polly duck, then sure, you can go all over the place. You don't have to date just in the air on the ground. You can hop on a little lake and chat up the swans. I don't know.
Whereas lobsters famously mate for life, so definitely not
Oof.
one for you.
Well, as long as it's not like exclusive for life, no problem for life. It's just, does it have to be exclusive?
True, that's a good point. Yeah, these lobsters could be, but apparently, according to Friends, to bring it back, having mentioned Matthew Perry before, Phoebe talks about how they walk around you can see lobsters walking around the tanks or the bottom of the sea, like holding claws.
Holding hands.
So you can just imagine a big, long line of everyone holding hands with all their partners.
The lobster polycule, exactly. Right? How did we end up here? I don't know. But yeah, but Fingernails just felt for the first hour of Fingernails, I thought this feels like it could be up there with her and it deserves its place. But I think it's not a bad film. And the first hour, I would say, is really strong. It just somehow kind of evaporates in the last hour.
Absolutely.
All the potential, and all the, like you said, the questions and where it could go seems unexplored.
Yeah, I just wanted them to get into that more. I wanted them to really think, what would be the consequences if we did have this test? Where would that lead? Because I feel like in The Lobster, they really do push it. If we lived in a society where you absolutely have to be in a relationship, what would that lead to? Because I think the stuff about them being focused on superficial things, I think that is actually built into the premise that you have to find someone within 45 days. There isn't time to connect on any deeper level. So they focus on these very shallow things. Yeah. And so it all makes sense within it. And sort of the institutionalization of it. It feels like that's being explored as well. This like our preoccupation with being institutionalized, even outside of like, okay, the state is enforcing it, but really it's our like predisposition to want to be controlled in these ways. Like we have that already in the way that we're so narrow about our relationships, apart from you, dear James. So that always like really, it's satisfying to watch, even though it's like horrific to watch because it's so violent and dark. But you're right. In Fingernails, I was like, come on, let's think about this. What would happen if we're all taking this test? And I don't really feel like we got there.
It perhaps needed a bit more work on its dystopia setting, that perhaps it's government mandated, but then it becomes a bit more sci-fi. It's a fine balance, isn't it? I do love as well, go back to The Lobster, the fact that there's like singletons, or I can't remember what the name they call them now, but they're like, the loners, that's right. So,
yes, led by Léa Seydoux being like this completely like sadistic leader. I love that. I love that in both there are these two concepts. They're like very controlled rules of finding a partner, and you're going to become turned into an animal in 4 to 5 days if you don't. But if you shoot someone, then you'll be able to get an extra day. There's these very strict rules of engagement, and they can't masturbate and all this stuff. And then
but you can have a sexy nurse. You can have a sexy maid. Sorry,
rub herself against you. My God. Yes, and then you've got Colin Farrell. We didn't even mention how brilliant Colin Farrell is in it. But then when he manages to escape and joins this group of loners, you think, oh, good, he's free of all of this. Yeah. But no, their rules are just as strict.
They've got their own rules.
Exactly. They have to be loners. It's one or the other. Again, speaking to this obsession we have with being institutionalized and controlled.
And then the idea that perhaps if you're not partnered, you're seen as what's wrong with you. The idea that they are, it's all pushed. Yeah. There's that feeling in just regular society. Oh, have you not met someone yet? Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
The Lobster is just pushing that to a ridiculous extreme, which is what makes it so fun, I think. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's been good to revisit both her and Lobster. It really made me, I don't know, I didn't have a great time with Lobster the first time round, but really enjoyed it much more the second time. Probably just where my head was at the time. I was a loner, so feeling a bit ostracized by the film.
Oh my God, that's so that. Well, then what's my excuse? Because I was like loving it more than ever, and I'm such a loner. But no, I think I think this film, the first time I watched it, I just turned it off after 15 minutes because I just thought this. I'm not in the right mood. You have to be in. Yeah, there's a certain like just a bleak feel to it
which is oppressive. It's like rich. It is oppressive, isn't it? I guess that's it. you don't feel any oppressiveness in Fingernails than the way that you do in Lobster. You feel like you've got no choice in the Lobster, whereas in Fingernails, it feels like, well, you don't have to do the test.
And in that sense, I would actually recommend Fingernails more for the general viewer. It's because ultimately, the film doesn't really fully work in the dystopian theme that is underpinning it. But as a funny, slightly surreal, wacky, quirky, I should say, rom-com, it works pretty well. So
absolutely, and there's great central performances. It looks beautiful. It's a decent film. It just doesn't quite match the high standard of Her and Lobster. But I enjoyed it for the first hour. The second hour was okay, but I started to zone out a little bit. It just didn't quite follow through.
All right, well, shall we finish up with an entry to the film pharmacy?
Absolutely, yes.
Dear Lily and James, I keep finding myself at literary events. I want to impress, but I'm not much of a reader. Any film adaptations you'd recommend that stay close to the story and maybe even better than the book? And maybe are even better than the book. I think that was a typo.
Yeah, this is a thing I keep coming back to about adaptations from one art form to another. Do they ever improve upon the original version? Can you translate a book to a film, which is a completely different medium that has different rules and different ways of immersing the audience? Can you ever improve upon the book? And I often think about this. And yeah, so I have a few ideas, but I'm concerned that because your friend or our friend goes to literary events, that the books that they want us to me to come up with are like literary style books. Because I've got a couple, which I hope maybe one of them might do.
Okay, well, hit me with it. What have you got?
First one is the book Nothing Lasts Forever, which was made into the film Die Hard. So a definite improvement upon the source material, but at a literary event, are you going to want to reference... I mean, it's not really like the book that everyone's talking about then. But then the other one I thought of, which is, again, I'd say The Godfather. Mario Puzo's book was quite an unwieldy novel. And Francis Ford Coppola didn't really change much. He just boiled it down. So it's much more focused and it's a much tighter plot.
That's perfect. And I guess you could just start a conversation about the surprising sources for some of cinema's greatest action films.
There we
like
go.
Jaws as well. I'm often surprised by the films that actually started as a book. So I feel like these are the kinds of stories that surely are made to be on film rather than in the literary form, no? I mean, I've not read either. I can't really speak from experience with those ones, but...
Yeah, I think some books are written. I know Michael Crichton, an author, he kind of writes his books knowing or wanting them to become adapted into films. So they're essentially like a first pitch or a pitch document for a film.
Right, and I just remembered Heat 2, right? Heat 2 started out as a script, and then in the end, Michael Mann has made it into a book, right? Has it been published yet?
It has been published, and it's now been announced that I think the film's underway. It's in development with Michael Mann, with I think Adam Driver as a young someone, one of the two. I can't remember Macaulay.
But he must have really shrunk with age to become either of them. He's about double the size of both of them. All right, good. Okay, well yours are a little bit less obvious than mine. You're a bit more niche.
Oh, Lily, I'm intrigued.
No, so good shout, because to be honest, I couldn't help but just think of ones we've already talked about on the podcast. So Atonement, that is a really, I think, a very good adaptation of the book. It's really close, apart from the ending, which is, it conveys the same point, but with a very different final. The chapter is quite different to the ending of the film. Everything else is pretty close. Even Keira Knightley wearing the green dress in that sexy library scene, it was a green dress in the book. So so it's a great one if you want to talk about a book. They'll never know, as long as you avoid talking about the ending, which, right. The point is still the same. So that's a good one. And also Fight Club. Have you ever read Fight Club?
I've not. No. Chuck Palahniuk, is it?
Yeah. And I confess I only read about the first fifth of it, because it sounded so much like the voice of it was so close to the voiceover in the film that I was like, you know what, I've already seen this. I'm not going to bother. I
don't need to read it.
Yeah, I was like, I know every beat of it. Every beat was the same. And I'm sure it goes in different directions, but that one I'd recommend because so similar.
Ah, excellent. Well, there we go. A wide smorgasbord of choices there.
Yeah,
for
I
your
hope
next
those will
literary
help
event.
you out. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if you could leave us a like, leave us a review, it all helps us get us out to a wider audience.
Absolutely. So we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Follow us on Instagram at Groovy Movies Pod or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
Groovy Movies was produced and edited by Lily Austin.
Music and sound by James Brailsford.
Our logo was designed by Abby Jo Sheldon.
For references and more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.